Everybody, listen carefully. The Martians are coming this way.
War of the Worlds is the film that taught Hollywood what an alien invasion actually looks like, a movie so terrifying that Pentagon officials were consulted just to make the Martians hard enough to kill. But even after 7 decades, this film is still hiding secrets. Did you know George Pal's original version had no romance, no California setting, and a completely different hero searching for his missing wife through a collapsing civilization?
Welcome to California.
Or that 4 legendary directors, including Hitchcock, each had their own version of this story, none of which ever made it to screen. Today we're uncovering the hidden truths about War of the Worlds 1953, including the alternate film that Paramount buried before a single frame was shot. 15. The ending. They never filmed. The film ends the way H.G. Wells always intended, and the Martians, unstoppable against every weapon humanity has, are killed by ordinary bacteria. It's a humbling, poetic ending that made the film immortal, but the version George Pal originally wanted looked nothing like that. When Pal took over the project in 1951, he envisioned something far closer to Wells's novel. A lone man searching desperately for his missing wife as civilization collapsed around him. No scientist hero, no love story, no neat resolution. Just a man lost in the apocalypse. Paramount's head of production, Don Hartman, rejected it entirely, demanding a romantic subplot, a conventional hero, and a California setting. Screenwriter Barry Lyndon rebuilt the film from scratch on top of Pal's abandoned vision. The bacteria ending survived. Everything else was quietly buried. Fact 14. Paramount owned the rights for 28 years. Without making the film, Paramount Pictures bought the film rights to H.G. Wells's novel in 1925, 28 years before the film was made. Cecil B. DeMille was the intended director from the start. His studio commissioned a script from writer Roy Pomeroy in 1925. It went unproduced. DeMille held the rights for decades, periodically revisiting the project and then setting it aside. 5 separate unproduced scripts were written during that time. In the 1930s, Paramount assigned Sergei Eisenstein, the Soviet director behind Battleship Potemkin, to develop it. He passed. Alfred Hitchcock entered discussions at one point. Alexander Korda, who had worked directly with H.G. Wells on things to come, expressed interest. Ray Harryhausen shot actual test footage of an animated Martian and sent it to Paramount, hoping to direct a Victorian-era version. He received no response. DeMille finally surrendered the rights to George Pal in 1951. The most famous science fiction property in Hollywood had sat in a filing cabinet for nearly 3 decades, while some of the greatest directors of the 20th century lined up and walked away from it. Fact 13. The Martian machines were designed to float because tripods were too hard to build. In H.G. Wells's novel, the Martians move on 3-legged war machines, towering tripods that stride across the landscape, destroying everything in their path. George Pal and art director Albert Nozaki wanted to use them. The technology available in 1952 made convincing walking mechanical legs essentially impossible to achieve on screen at any scale. The solution was elegant. The machines float on invisible magnetic beams rather than walking on physical legs. The decision to remove the legs was creative only in the sense that it replaced one visual problem with another. The Martian machines were built as physical models suspended on copper wires, and the wires are visible in multiple shots throughout the finished film. Generations of viewers have noticed the copper supports under what were supposed to be magnetically levitating craft. The tripod problem was solved by creating a levitation problem. Pal knew about the visible wires and left them in anyway, and the overall effect was convincing enough that he judged the trade-off acceptable. Fact 12. Lee Marvin was considered for the lead before Gene Barry. Before Gene Barry was cast as Dr. Clayton Forrester, the production considered Lee Marvin for the role. Marvin was a character actor building his reputation through television and supporting film roles in the early 1950s. He had not yet established himself as a leading man. His casting would have produced a significantly different tone for the film. Barry brought a clean, composed authority to the scientist's role, the kind of reassuring American professional presence that 1950s science fiction regularly required of its protagonist. Marvin's screen persona, even in his earliest work, carried an edge of unpredictability and physical menace that Barry's never suggested. Forrester as Marvin would have been a harder, less reassuring figure. The production chose Barry. Marvin continued building the career that would eventually earn him an Academy Award for Cat Ballou in 1965. The Martians were defeated without him. The film would have been a different experience. With him in it, fact 11, a stuntman was badly burned filming the heat ray sequence. The sequence where a soldier is struck by the Martian heat ray, reduced to a smoldering silhouette before disintegrating, required a stuntman to be set on fire in a controlled manner. The flames did not stay controlled. The fire got out of hand during the sequence and the stuntman was badly burned. He recovered. The disintegration effect that followed his burning, the moment the soldier's body reduces to ash, required 144 individual matte paintings, each representing a different stage of the figure's dissolution, composited together frame by frame. The technical work on a single 3-second shot took longer than most complete scenes in the film. A sequence that lasted 3 seconds on screen cost one stuntman real injuries and one effects team an enormous amount of careful, meticulous work. Both investments are visible. The heat ray scene remains one of the most viscerally effective moments in 1950s science fiction cinema. Fact 10, George Pal appeared in his own film as a bum George Pal. Made a cameo appearance in The War of the Worlds. He plays an unnamed bum in one of the Los Angeles street sequences, a disheveled figure among the fleeing crowd that the camera passes over without dwelling on. Pal had a habit of inserting himself into his own productions. The cameo was not publicized. Most audience members watching the film in 1953 had no idea the figure shuffling through the chaos was the same man who had spent 2 years fighting to get the production made. A producer who had inherited a 28-year-old unrealized property, rebuilt it from scratch, and delivered it to an Oscar. And a place in film history gave himself a single, uncredited shot as a man with nowhere to go. It is the most self-deprecating cameo in science fiction cinema history. Fact 9. Ray Harryhausen shot test footage and was completely ignored. Before George Pal was assigned to The War of the Worlds, stop-motion animator Ray Harryhausen had been pursuing the project independently. Harryhausen was a passionate advocate for a Victorian-era adaptation, one that preserved Wells's original 1890s setting and used his stop-motion technique to bring the tripod war machines to life. He constructed test footage of an animated Martian and sent it directly to Paramount. He received no response of any kind, not a rejection, not an acknowledgement. Nothing. His footage was filed away and his pitch was ignored entirely. Pal's version moved the story to 1950s California and solved the tripod problem by eliminating the legs. Harryhausen went on to define practical creature effects through films like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, and Clash of the Titans, a career built on work that remains technically astonishing 50 years later. The test footage he sent to Paramount still exists. It was the beginning of one of cinema's greatest careers and simultaneously the most ignored audition reel in Hollywood history. Fact 8. The film was originally planned to end in partial 3D. George Pal had a specific vision for the film's final act. He wanted the sequence beginning with the atomic bomb attack on the Martians, the moment humanity deploys its most powerful weapon and watches it fail, to be shown in 3 dimensions. Pal planned for audiences to put on 3D glasses at that specific moment, timed to coincide with characters in the film donning goggles to observe the explosion. The transition would have been seamless and immersive. Paramount said no. The studio had concerns about the cost of the conversion and the logistics of distributing both standard and 3D prints to theaters. The 3D ending never happened. The atomic sequence was filmed and presented in standard Technicolor, like everything that preceded it. Pal's idea, using the film's most devastating moment as the point where the audience was literally pulled into the screen, it remains one of the more inventive, unrealized concepts in 1950s cinema. The glasses stayed in the lobby. Fact 7. The atomic bomb footage was real. The sequence depicting the atomic bomb being dropped on the Martian machines used actual archival footage, From real nuclear weapons tests conducted by the United States military, the mushroom cloud that rises after the detonation is not a model or a special effect. It is documentary footage of a real nuclear weapon being detonated, cut into a Hollywood science fiction film. In 1953, nuclear testing was ongoing, and footage from those tests was becoming part of the cultural vocabulary. Audiences who watched the atomic bomb fail against the Martian force fields had all seen similar imagery on newsreels. The decision to use real test footage rather than a constructed effect gave the sequence a weight that no miniature explosion could have produced. The Martian machines survived something that audiences recognized as the most destructive force humanity had ever created. That recognition is what makes their continued advance so genuinely frightening. The fear was real because the footage was real. Fact 6. Woody Woodpecker was hidden in the opening crash. George Pal was close personal friends with Walter Lantz, the animator who created Woody Woodpecker. Their friendship dated back to Pal's arrival in Hollywood after fleeing Europe ahead of World War II. Pal had a private tradition. He hid Woody Woodpecker somewhere in every film he produced as a tribute to his friendship with Lantz and as a personal good luck charm. In The War of the Worlds, Woody appears in a treetop at the center of the frame during the sequence where the first Martian meteorite crashes to Earth near Linda Rosa. He is visible for a brief moment as the camera pans across the impact site. A cartoon bird perched in a tree while the end of the world begins below him. Nobody in the theater noticed. Pal had not told them to look. The cartoon woodpecker, hidden in the opening act of one of the most celebrated science fiction films of the decade, was a private joke between two men who had survived the same century. Fact 5. The film was shot in partly faked locations. The War of the Worlds was set in Southern California, but filmed across a combination of real locations and studio constructions. The fictional town of Linda Rosa, where the first Martian landing occurs, was the real city of Corona, California. St. Brendan's Catholic Church on South Van Ness Avenue in Los Angeles provided the setting for the film's climactic sequence where survivors gather to pray as the Martian machines close in around them. The rolling hills of El Sereno, Los Angeles provided additional exterior footage. Paramount's backlot and sound stages handled the interior scenes, and the large-scale destruction sequences, Florence, Arizona, and Simi Valley, California, also appear. The production moved across a surprising range of genuine Southern California geography, creating the impression of a full-scale regional invasion by filming the actual region being invaded. The city under attack on screen was, in several shots, the actual city. The Martians were made of copper wire and painted balsa. The streets were real. Fact 4. The film was inducted into the National Film Registry. In 2011, The War of the Worlds was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. The registry selects films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, works that represent something essential about American cinema or American life. The 1953 film was recognized for all three criteria. It defined the visual language of the alien invasion film for decades, directly influencing every major science fiction production that followed it. It encoded Cold War anxiety into entertainment in a way that made that anxiety visible and manageable. And it demonstrated what practical effects filmmaking could achieve at a moment when the technology was still being invented. A film made for $2 million on a backlot in California was judged by the National Cultural Institution responsible for preserving American film heritage to be among the works most worth keeping. The Library of Congress agreed with what audiences had known since 1953. Some films earn their place in the permanent record. Fact 3. The Martian disintegration shot required 144 manatees. The moment Colonel Hefner is struck by the Martian heat ray and dissolves, his body reducing to a skeletal outline, and then to nothing, is one of the film's most technically complex visual effects achievements. The shot required 144 individual matte paintings. Each painting represented a different stage of the disintegration, building frame by frame from a living human figure to an absence. The paintings were composited together in sequence to produce the final 3-second effect. The work was performed by the film's effects team under the supervision of Gordon Jennings, whose work on the film's visual effects would earn the Academy Award, Jennings died shortly before the Oscar ceremony and never received the award in person. The most technically demanding shot in the film, 144 hand-painted frames for 3 seconds of screen time, was the work of a man the Academy honored posthumously. The technical achievement survived him. The recognition arrived too late. Fact 2, the film's most iconic sound was made with a guitar. The distinctive electronic sound of the Martian heat ray, the oscillating whine that accompanies every attack sequence, was created by running a guitar string through an amplifier and manipulating the output electronically. Sound designer Gene Garvin worked with the film's audio team to produce a library of alien sounds that had no precedent in cinema. The heat ray sound became one of the most imitated audio signatures in science fiction history, referenced, homaged, and directly reproduced in films and television shows for the following 7 decades. The Martian war machine sound, the electronic pulse of the force field, the ambient hum of the spacecraft, all were constructed from manipulated recordings of everyday instruments and objects processed through early electronic equipment. A film that won its Oscar for visual effects was building an equally influential sonic vocabulary at the same time. The guitar string whine of a heat ray has been heard in more science fiction productions than any other single sound in the genre's history. Fact 1, the glass jar sound was a tribute to Orson Welles. The most carefully chosen sound effect in The War of the Worlds is the one nobody noticed at the time. When the hatch of the Martian machine begins to unscrew, during the film's first close encounter, the sound used to represent the turning of that metal lid was created by slowly rotating a metal cap on a glass jar. The choice was specific and deliberate. In Orson Welles' 1938 radio broadcast, the adaptation that had panicked America and made the story famous, the same technique had been used to create the sound of the Martian machine opening. George Powell's production team knew exactly what they were doing. They were reaching across 15 years of cultural history and connecting their film to the broadcast that had proved the story's power. A sound effect buried in the first act was a secret handshake between a 1953 Hollywood production and the radio broadcast that had terrified a nation in 1938. Most audiences never heard the tribute. The people who made the film knew it was there. That was enough. And that's 15 weird facts about The War of the Worlds, a film that spent 28 years in a filing cabinet, survived 5 unproduced scripts, hit a cartoon woodpecker in its opening act, and paid tribute to Orson Welles with a glass jar. Which fact hit hardest? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into the classics that built the science fiction world we still live in. Until next time.